that's what they've brought to the land, and they've cultivated the land that has been given to them.
Take us to a couple of other places, maybe share a few other memories, and I just want to unpack that for our family that's listening right now.
I'd be happy. I always say to people, though, when they ask me favorite places in Israel, I do love the Sea of Galilee, but they'll ask me the favorite place, and that's really like picking your favorite child. Do you really have the favorite? I mean, they do, but, they don't want to admit it. I love Jerusalem as well. To have the time to be in Jerusalem, to stand at the Western Wall and to say prayers at the Western Wall, it's so powerful. I've put so many prayers in the wall. I've read my Bible. I've prayed. I've cried at the wall, and just that incredible experience. And then, if you have the opportunity to be there on a Friday night for Shabbat, to see the joy of them, of the Jewish people, and also, tourists and people coming from everywhere, welcoming in the Sabbath, incredible. And it's just such a unique experience.
Start your journey to Israel by visiting holyland.israel.travel. Check that website out. A lot of great information on how you can plan a trip to Israel. That's the Middle East Report. I'm John Riley. Get a podcast of the show wherever you get your podcast, on all the major podcast platforms. Just search for the Middle East Report, or you can go to afr.net. Thanks for listening.
Exploring Missions with Pastors Bert and Nathan Harper.
When I became a Christian believer, I felt that God was calling me to go to North India as a witness.
We focus on the most vulnerable in the Metro Atlanta area.
Operation Care International is started in Dallas, and now we have partnered with 52 countries.
Exploring Missions explores missions. Find it on the podcast page at afr.net. Welcome to Them Before Us on American Family Radio, where we strive to put children before adults. Our goal is to educate the public on a child-centered perspective of marriage and family, and represent the rights of children on policy matters. Now, here's the host and founder of Them Before Us, Katie Faust.
Welcome to Them Before Us Radio. I'm your host, Katie Faust, founder and president of Them Before Us, a global movement that seeks to put them, the children, before us, the adults, on all matters of marriage and family. And for the next hour, that's what we're going to be talking about. We're going to be looking at some trending news. We're going to be answering some of the questions that you sent in. We're going to be talking about everything from making babies to how we create an economy that works for men so that they can support their families. But first, as always, we're going to kick things off with a little bit of Bible time. I have moved out of Nehemiah, which was so beneficial and helpful for a variety of different reasons. And over the last week or two, I have started the Colson Fellows. This is a year-long fellowship with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, where we're going to be reading about a dozen books that have to do with worldview formation, listening to different lectures, watching different videos, and then once a month getting together to discuss it with our local cohort. And I think that for the last week or two, all we've done is Genesis chapter 1. Just read and reread Genesis chapter 1 over and over, layered on top of other questions and other scriptures. And obviously this is a passage that's very familiar to a lot of us for good reason. But what has been emphasized in this course is our stewardship over creation. The idea that we have some real distinctives here that are different from the other animals. And that while God does command many of them to be fruitful and multiply, he tells us to govern and to steward the earth. And that we really do have sort of a creation mandate that looks different from the other created things. And that mandate comes directly from God, our creator. We still have a creator-creation distinction there. But we've got this bizarre hybrid. Humans are this strange sort of collab between the created world and the Godhead himself, where we reflect some of his attributes in ways that the antelope and the ant and the anteater are not going to reflect. And part of that means bringing in these attributes with God that we share into all aspects of our work, whether it is cultivating our garden, whether it is running a multinational bank, whether it is parenting our own children, and that we have to take it very seriously. And I would say almost the rise and fall of the project of bringing salvation to the nations will depend on largely how we steward how we conduct ourselves as stewards over all of creation. So the responsibility, because it is a responsibility, to bring excellence and governance to every aspect of the world that God has allowed me to bring into socially in terms of my vocation, even just stewarding my body, has really, really hit home for me this week. I am joined, as I very often am, in this first segment with my executive director, Josh Wood. Josh, any insights on Genesis chapter 1 and our special relationship to creation and to the earth?
Stewardship in general, I think, comes from, our reflecting back attributes and characteristics that God himself modeled. And I was talking to a pastor actually earlier this morning at breakfast, and he was just describing how almost Genesis 1-2 have so much truth that's an antidote for culture's problems today. But we just forget we think because there's all these new attacks on our identity as human beings, different ways of forming families, different ways of operating in the workplace, different ways of, you go down the list, that we almost feel like we have to come up with new ways to defend Christianity. And his point was, there are so many antidotes to the cultural distortions of today, however creative and scientific they may appear, in what God gave us first, which was his, idyllic depiction of male and female, how we create, how we are like God when we create, and then what we do with that creation as far as stewarding, protecting, and even the idea that we create what's in our image, kids that look like us, but we look like God. There's just so much wrapped up in such a little space that it's often easy to just forget that God gave us so much of the antidotes to today's problems in his word, if we'll go look and find it.
Mm-hmm. And this idea of sort of stewarding and ruling over creation in ways that do not blur the line between God's ability to create and our ability to steward. Like you said, we can do that in a procreative sense, but there's a lot of different areas, and if you're a regular listener of Them Before Us Radio, you're aware of them, that we are blurring the line between, are we makers of life? Are we takers of life? That's the domain of God. And so there still are some very hard and fast boundaries between our role as stewards and co-creators, where we need to figure out where and how to walk that line. And that feeds into the first news headline that we're going to talk about. And that is that a 30-year-old baby was born over the last couple weeks. This little baby, Thaddeus, was created through IVF 30 years ago. I don't know his entire backstory. Where are his genetic parents? Or have they already passed away? Was he simply abandoned in a frozen orphanage like a million other children across this country? But it broke a record. We have been thawing and implanting IVF-created children for several decades. Some of them are old because the parents wait a while before they transfer the next child. And some of them, as we've seen, are now close to or older than the women that are giving birth to them. So Josh, do you want to just give us a quick recap of IVF and kind of an idea of how we need to think about it from the perspective of defenders of children's rights?
Well, this specific case with Thaddeus is fascinating because it always, these type of stories, a 30-year-old baby, first, like whoever says that, it always catches everyone's attention. And then there's varying degrees of how outraged or upset people are. And, going back to Genesis, it all kind of depends on, well, how in God's image is the embryo, right? Those that don't think it's really life, maybe it's that magical birth canal and no one's a life until they come out of their mother. Maybe they don't see this as all that problematic. They're like, oh, this is kind of just an interesting science story. Versus those who have a really, I would say, high view of creation and see this as God's image, would say that from the moment of conception, yes, this is in fact a 30-year-old baby. And that begs the question, how many more are there like this if we've been doing this for this long and now it's a tragedy? This is a massive abuse of human rights and child rights, and we should be outraged. So it just as you were talking about, I'm like, so much of this does depend on how willing we are to go back to first things and say, if this is life and it's created in God's image, regardless of location or what stage, you put in scare quotes, what it could do for us, or how able it is to live on its own right now. It's life, and life is in God's image, and it deserves to be protected. So this process of IVF, they took this embryo, they froze it a long time ago. It was abandoned. Someone took it, implanted it, and then a brand new mother for this child to carry. This mother had the child, and they've essentially now adopted this 3-day-old, but really 30-day-old child. And while I'd say, man, I celebrate that, this seems to me, again, we don't know all the stories, this seems to me like two people who are trying to do a good thing when this child has lost something. So I'd say, kudos to that. What scares me about this is every time this comes up, if our outrage is not sparked to question the industry, again, there's a certain level of celebration for adults trying to do a difficult thing, but if we are not equally outraged at the industry that put this child in this precarious position, and we're not questioning what education the parents had when first going through the process to make sure that this wasn't